Hello, dear NDL instructors. My name is Jan. I'm an NDL instructor examiner. And before you will start to listen this course, I want to tell you a few words about it. First, I need to tell what this online course is about and for whom it may be interesting. It's full theory of NDL instructor course, according to the latest NDL Course Director manual. It could be interesting to instructors who want to update their knowledges or to remember some points of instructor course. The second, what I want to tell, it's how to work with it. It's recorded lectures. And of course, you will have no any possibility to ask me some questions online. But one of the target of these lessons is to give you a clear understanding what I want to tell during these lectures. So please, before you will start viewing these lectures, prepare a pen and notebook, where during viewing lectures you will write your questions. Or maybe not only questions, but also some doubts, or maybe disagreements if you will have it. Remember, on this course we haven't any forbidden terms. If you want to ask or tell something, tell it without any hesitation. We will discuss it, and I will try to explain my position more detailed. You, as an NDL instructor, as a dying professional, need to have a strong position compared to other instructors. NDL is proud of you, and we want to make your work maximum comfortable, effective, and, of course, maximum profitable. To make it, we need to understand each other very, very good. So please, ask me any questions. And finally, the third point that I want to tell you, this video was filmed with one take, just with one take, without any cutting, without any editing. I do it like this to make this course available for you as quickly as possible. So, this video may not be ideal, of course. There could be sometimes a little problems with picture or maybe some spelling mistakes. But generally, I hope so. It doesn't hurt you to understand what I want to tell. Otherwise, please ask me to explain a topic more detailed. So, that's what I want to tell you before you will start to use this course. Thank you for attention. Enjoy the course. Hello everyone! Today we are starting NDL instructor course. And first lesson will be a big introduction of the course. We will talk about who is an instructor, what kind of characteristics need he has, and what candidate will learn during this course. Let's start from the beginning. Who is an instructor? The first feature that this person must have is experience in diving, right? The scuba instructor is a person who is able to dive. This person has learned the theory, practiced it a lot, so he knows how to dive. Primarily, the instructor is an experienced diver. And now, this person wants to share his experience with someone. The main goal of that experienced person is to teach other people how to dive. However, it cannot be achieved because experienced person, expert or master in something, doesn't mean that the person is able to share his or her experience. Experienced diver or freediver, for example, is not necessarily a good instructor. Knowing and sharing the experience are different sort of things. A stunning example is arithmetic, or for example our native language. For example, a kid asks you to teach him arithmetic or native language. We are experiencing these fairs. Every day we speak, every day we count. We are very good at speaking our native language. We know how to count. Nevertheless, unless we have the teaching aids and we know how to use them, a kid is able to blow our mind. He may ask us, just easy question. What does the number mean? And please try to answer this question. The first thought that will come into your mind is, of course, to open textbooks or spelling book and refresh memory about how somebody taught you that at school, for example. You will use sticks for explaining arithmetic and so on. But the problem is that this teaching method is low quality one. The first reason is what person remembers is called patchy memories. The person can remember one kind of information and forget another. Secondly, we cannot evaluate the quality of how that person was taught, how instructor was taught. Maybe he also was not very good taught, yes? And finally, we get low quality experience as a result. The person can forget something important or say something unnecessarily and so on. That will lead to low quality teaching methods. So we have the same situation in Dying Sphere. The dive masters, for example, who have dived 200, 300, 500, maybe 1000 times, are not necessarily good teachers. You know, in a best case scenario, that person will open textbooks and share them with others. As a result, in most cases, if a dive master, if just experienced person want to teach somebody, it will be not a proper job. That person, of course, can be a very good diver, but he can miss some very important information. He don't know how to teach. Or, for example, alternatively, this person needs to have great amount of time to teach another one, because he will try to share all the information that he knows. But of course, it will be also not a very good education, not very good. Because of that, we need the teaching aids and we need instructor training courses. Quite often, dive masters, candidates call and ask about instructor course. And their first most frequent question is, what you will teach us in Dying Sphere? It sounds like we are already such experienced divers. What unusual information can you provide to us? They say, we have ideal buoyancy in water. We dive perfectly. We know the theory as well. We were the frogmen in the past with 10,000 hours, for example, diving experience. What do you want to teach us during this course? And firstly, we need to say that this course doesn't provide teaching how to dive. It's suggested that a candidate had already learned it. We don't teach how to dive. Of course, we check the candidate's skill level and also check that he has good buoyancy in water. He knows how to accomplish all the skills. He knows the theory in physics and physiology of diving, etc. But he needed to learn how to dive already during dive master course, during the course of professional buoyancy, and so on. There he had to learn all of this. Of course, there is always room for improvement in the Angstsphere, as in all of the exercise, all of the other sciences. But dive master knowing of theory of diving is must be enough for teaching people. He need to know all needed theoretical knowledges in physics, physiology, and so on. And instructor course suggests that we check, of course, that knowledges, and we check that candidate is considerable. Instead of teaching how to dive during this course, we teach how to teach diving. How to teach, how to speak correctly, how to grab the audience attention. We teach the management and marketing too. We talk about diving business in general. And when the person comes to the diving, or for example, free diving instructor training course, this person is already needed to be experienced. He needs to know his stuff. We only check his skills. And to share his experience, he needs his second future. He must be a teacher. A teacher is the second future of diving instructor. Instructor is a person who is able to use teaching aids, knows the methodic and how to use it. The main aim for person who comes to the instructor course is to learn how to use the teaching aids. In our NDL course, instructor doesn't need to reinvent the wheel as the lecturer needs. He doesn't need to invent these programs and courses of lectures. This course has been already invented, has been already created and written in manuals. Our purpose is to teach you how to use these manuals and share our own experience in a more quality manner. So, the second future, teacher. The third obligatory future of instructor is oratory. This person must be orator. Probably its orator is the most important feature of instructor on my mind. Maybe, of course. First of all, we need to say that futures teacher and orator don't go hand in hand. If you are a teacher, that doesn't mean you are a good orator. The spectacular example is not all, of course, but most school teachers, many, not maybe most, but many school teachers, maybe lecturers, and so on. Very often, they are not very good orators or people who win the audience. Very often, students wait for the end of such lectures. Because it's impossible to listen to such person's speech. It's quite boring. And often it's not lecture's fault, because for example, in Russia I had been getting research degree, and earlier education system was that earlier you didn't need to study getting such degree. You needed just to write a dissertate. But now you really study getting research degree, and you learn how to become a lecturer also. Now it's their purpose also. They need to prepare lecturer, not just scientist, also lecturer. And when I had been getting research degree, there wasn't any oratory. There wasn't, and still there isn't, such discipline. Nothing has changed. And when postgraduate students comes into the auditorium and he needs to teach the students, he doesn't know how to behave. Of course, he has already spoken at conferences, maybe make some presentation, but the one thing is to, roughly speaking, just read, and another one is to teach people. It's very different. And of course, everyone tries to do his best. Some of them have a talent, some of them talent to speak. Some of them try to roll with the punches and make the speech interesting. However, many postgraduate students and lecturers and professors tell tedium. Of course, it's not always like that. But anyway, it's not a problem for them. Yes, because many of them are not worried about whether students listen them or not. Of course, as a person, you want to be heard, but in general, they don't lose anything. For example, salary. Because the student doesn't have a choice. He needs to pass exams. He or she will come and pass the theoretical economics or something else. And if the student didn't listen to a lecturer, he or she would get bad mark. So they need listen to the professor. Is it interesting or not? It's the same situation in many countries. It's not just in Russia. It's just like an example, but the same situation is in many countries. But we have another situation in dying sphere. People pay money for studying, and lecture is the most important part of instructor work. Of course, practice is also very important, but lecture is most important because, in that case, students assess an instructor. No, our studying of dying can be divided into two parts, of course. The first is theory that you get in classroom, and the second is practice in the water. And when instructor teaches the person in the water, the student doesn't have an opportunity to assess an instructor. He doesn't know how to do it because he had never been taught how to dive. He see it first time. He dives first time, and he doesn't know this. The student doesn't know the whole process. He completely trusts the instructor. Of course, we will talk a little bit later on the other lesson that we have some instruments to change it. But generally, this student doesn't know how to dive, and anyway, he completely trusts the instructor. And I want to tell you about one situation, and I want to highlight that it's incorrect. It's very bad. And the situation is that the instructor, because of that, can do whatever he wants in the water. He is able to make mistakes, dive not very good, have some problem with buoyancy, and the student won't understand it because he doesn't know how dive a good diver, how need to dive, how must be dive. And as a result, we can get low quality preparation of students in the water, because students doesn't know whole process. And you as instructors or instructors of course know it. They see the students who come. Of course, you have seen such students who came from the other instructor, from the other dance centers, and which preparation was bad, not good. It's really so. The reason of that is that misunderstanding the concept of preparation. The person didn't have any guidance, the student, and he doesn't know how it must be done. That's why we also have added practical session in our textbooks. To student must know which skills he must done underwater. But not all the organization have it, and that's why many students doesn't know how must be this practical skills, how must practice be done, and the student can thought that it's the right way of preparing divers. Like an example, once a woman came to us. She was already diver. She was from another diving center and want to pass a buoyancy course in our diving center. And one of our instructor, he told her, please prepare a white belt. And she asked, what is this white belt? Why I need it? What its purpose? She doesn't know. She didn't know what is this white belt, because her last instructor taught her in the swimming pool without wetsuit, and he didn't give her the white belt and didn't tell her what is it and why it's needed. Of course, we don't know all the details. What else she didn't know, but this example is enough. The student with certificate, with basic certificate, doesn't know what is this white belt. So, and the person, of course, the student will acknowledge the locality of practice later. If the person come to another instructor, like this woman come to our dance center, or during the communication with another people, he or she will acknowledge that education was not very good, but it will be too late. Yeah. So of course it is very bad, and I gave you these examples to show that instructors cannot behave like that. Of course, the cat will come out of the bag anyway. Many people know each other in the ionosphere, but news are quickly spread, and in general you need to maintain your reputation. And of course, in our case, our work, instructor work, directly influence people's lives, and the students trust their instructors. So it's the practice, but we have different situation with lectures, because the student knows how the lecturer needs to speak, even if the person himself doesn't have a lofty level of discourse, because he always listened to the people's speech, while attending lectures or lessons at school, university, short meetings at work. The person knows how the instructor needs to speak, and your student will assess you in this way, how you speak. And it's very important because you will make a contact with that person. If your speech is interesting, the student will appreciate you more and study further. Mostly people, and we will talk about it later also, go into dance fair not only to dive, but they are looking for someone to hang around with. They search interesting people. If it is interesting to study with you, the person will do it. He will keep contact, go somewhere, go to research if you are working there, and so on and so on. And one of the most important thing for instructor, for you, is to be an orator. And during the lectures, you can establish a contact with your student. I recommend to make lectures alive, not just to give a book, not just to give a video, because here on the lectures you becoming friends. Just speak and becoming friends. So the third important feature is oratory. And next lectures will concern oratory. We will discuss of the methodic of teaching, and another part will be also about oratory. The fourth feature that instructor needs is to be a psychologist. For university lecture, in most cases, the student body doesn't matter. We have an aim not just to teach person, but also to make money. And you are not ashamed for it. The high quality work, your work is worthy is worthy high salary. And we need to understand how to make people interested. All people are different, and you need to have various approaches for different people. And on the course we will discuss general psychological rules. And remember that every instructor chooses his or her own behavior model. On the instructor course, we don't make people become robots. When you, as an instructor, chooses behavior model, you need to like it. It doesn't make sense if the person doesn't like it. But in another case, it will be unpleasant for the person. And you need to take into account that there is a general behavior model, so-called from the general to the special. When people come to the first class, we see absolutely different people in one group. They have a different sense of humor and interests. And you are not able to adapt to all of them immediately. It's impossible to see their interests and nature at first glance. Well, for example, just about humor. Someone likes one comic, another one likes another. The rest of others considered lowbrow humor, and it's very hard to. It's very difficult, and because of all of that, you need to choose multiply purpose behavior model. You will respect and will be respected with the help of that model. You will not to try to adapt to all of the students. Then after it, you will find individual approach. After when a student goes to the buoyancy course and so on, then after it. But in the beginning, just general model. And in most cases, instructors don't have an idea how to adapt psychologically. It's many instructors' problem. Like example, when a person becomes an instructor, it's a new role for him. He or she has never been an instructor and has never taught adults. The person is not able to define the behavior model in this situation. And in such situation, the person starts using examples from the days gone by, from his life. He don't know how he needs to go. And for example, the person remembers his or her nursery teacher who had been teaching him or her. And the person copies nursery teacher's manners. Mostly women instructors behave like that. An instructor imagines that the students are his or her children, and the person starts to speak with them like with children. Let's take swim fitness, be careful, please be careful, let's go to the swimming pool, danger, and so on. And the person behaves like with children. And students don't understand what happens after all. Why you talk with me like with a child? Yeah. Another extreme situation is when person remembers his army service. For example, he had warrant officer or just officer from whom soldiers took orders from. And an instructor copies that officer's manners. Because of that, some instructors may be very strict or rugged. And we should remember that we are not in the army. We don't prepare students for airdrop mission or landing to Omaha Beach. We don't need severity in teaching. Sometimes, I'm sure you know such situation, an instructor may make the Kapranov by shouting, using vulgar language, maybe just about beating, and moreover, some students quite like it. They also imagine that they are Rambo who dive, and they suppose if an instructor shouts, it means the quality of teaching is high. However, of course, it's not so. And most people, of course, wouldn't like that. Some people may even punch instructors in the nose. And this kind of instructors forgets that in the army, soldiers have no choice. They need to comply with an order. The situation differs in recreational dining sphere. A student pays money and he doesn't want someone to shout at him. The reason of this instructor's behavior is because he or she doesn't know how to behave correctly. It's new situation. I'm new instructor, it's new situation for me, and I just remember who taught me. That's way what people can make such not correctly behavior. So also the severity about severity may come also from sport coach. The new instructor remembers that some time ago his coach shouted at him, and the person decided to shout at all his or her students too. I saw it also in gym when the coach shouting on the people. It's very also seems very strange when a young coach just about 25 years shouting on the big respectable man. So it's not correct. It's not correct. And we will discuss psychological behavior models also. We will analyze on the instructor course how to behave with students. And you remember, you choose behavior model by yourself. Nobody can stop you from behaving the way you have chosen. I will give you just some recommendation. But an instructor needs to be a psychologist. The next future is so-called person who provides services. It's it's not about business. It's not about businessmen. It's about keeping a cool head. The instructor needs to keep it. You need to be calm. At school, teachers are sometimes resentful at pupils and call them something. They may say, well, John, is there something interesting outside the window? Is it more interesting than our lesson? The teacher tries to make pupil ashamed. And a diving instructor, of course, needs to ignore this strategy. In the school, the pupil hasn't got any choice. A pupil needs to listen to elder person, needs to listen to the teacher. They're afraid of him. But already at university, the strategy isn't applicable. No, because the lecturer in university won't be able to shame a student in many cases because the student is not a child already, and he think that he is already also old, also adult, and he wants also some respect. But school teachers and lecturers at university have one goal: to raise a citizen. It's written in a statute, in Russia, for example. And you need to remember always that diving instructor doesn't have such goal. We have a goal to raise a people, especially adults. Also, you need to remember that person paid money for the lesson. You mustn't cut student down to size. Like an example, we had such situation. Firstly, I will explain some information about our company, about National Dive League. We have headquarters and the National Dive League office in St. Petersburg in Russia. Here is many people, many managers and people who make cards, printing, and etc. But also here, in addition, we have also diving center where we train staff and support our instructors in the city. We provide an opportunity for instructor freelancers to rent a diving center for not so high price. And in the swimming pool, often many freelancers, many our and the instructor freelancers. And I remember a situation when one rich young woman came to the diving center. She was so rich that she drive her car. She changed her cars almost every day. Every day she drive with new car. And she listened to the lecture as usual, then came to the swimming pool, and there were many young people. She was young, and many young people, instructors, staff masters, students, and instructor who must teach her was showing his students to her and to his students how to prepare scuba. And someone's joke distracted them. She, oops, something, ha ha ha. Out. And this instructor behaved like he was a school teacher. He said, "Well, Maria, I see that you are not interested in preparing scuba, yes? And how to attach the first degree to the cylinder valve. I see there's something more interesting than dying for you, yes?" And you know, this instructor didn't get a result. The woman just smiled ironically and probably thought, "Who are you to raise or shame me?" And of course, it's impossible to have friendly relationship after that. The instructor's behavior was like teachers one at school, and but the woman understood. She knew the ship had paid money. She is not a pupil for the lesson. And, of course, we need to change an instructor for her. It's important for you to understand me correctly. Our goal is to teach a person diving. Yes, and however, we need to attract his or her attention in another way, not like school teacher. We mustn't shame the person. It's adult. Remember that not only money matters, of course. Not only money, but the fact the student is also an adult and you haven't got the power to be rude to or to raise him or her. You may use feature from oratory course to attract students' attention. Also, you may shift students' attention to your own words in a polite manner. You don't have a right to shame the student, especially in front of the public. You need to remember that usually adult students listen to you without distraction. They are interested in studying by themselves. They pay money for it and they want to study. Of course, an exception might be, for example, when a student got a dying certificate, dying course for a present, or when, for example, a husband came with his wife or lover who is not keen on it. Nevertheless, you need to behave as a professional. If the person gets distracted, you will catch his or her interest in using different ways. You may ask questions or use your tone. We'll talk about it later, of course. How to do it. But if a student isn't still listening, if you try to do your best, let it be so. If he or she doesn't distract to others, of course. It may be that the student is listening with a hardened face. I had such students. It seemed that they fell asleep. But then they ask question about the topic, and I understand that he really heard to the lesson. But even if the person isn't listening with this hard face, but doesn't distract another students, let him behave the way. As a professional, remember, you've done your job. You've tried, you need to try catch students' interest. Of course, you need to try to catch it. You delivered a lecture. For example, student paid you for 5 lectures and 6 practical lessons and exam. And if a person pass exam, it's good. If no, the person wouldn't get a certificate. You with him, with the student, had an agreement about that. Before you start the course, you had an agreement. And if a student didn't listen, wasn't interested in the information, didn't attend lectures, it's also his fault, remember it. An instructor has done his best. And if a student has only 10 right answers out of 60, it's his own or also his own fault. Yes, so don't shout on him. Of course, okay, it's your fault. You need to be calm. The same is at university, where is paid education. A student may pay and he has chance not to come to lectures. He pay money, okay, for education in university. But then suddenly he or she doesn't pass an exam, he needs to retake it. We don't have a goal to offend students, but you need to remember, of course, I will repeat, that I'm talking about a situation when the student doesn't distract others. If he does, of course, you need to tell him about it. Now, let's talk about children a little bit. I can't say that they are ungrateful audience, but among them there are a lot of such people. That's because parents usually make these children come to the course. It doesn't matter whether they want to come or no, just go and so. And it's important also to understand that as DIANC instructor, as you as a DIANC instructor, we don't have a right to raise these children. We work with children just as they are adults. We can try to catch child's interest by asking questions, using different tones and your own authority. If students respect you, they will listen to you. However, we don't have a right to give them time lesson or accuse. Remember, they are even not our children. We are not at school. We don't have a need to raise these children. Parents want us to teach the children diving. And some parents, of course, may like your attempt to raise their kid. But other parents react with hostility. They can say you, raise your own kids, but don't try to behave like that with mine. You have to teach him how to dive, not to shout at him, not to raise him. And if you met a child who doesn't want to listen to you, you need to talk with his or her parents after lesson. If the child distracts others, you need to get him, of course, or her out of a room, because he distracts others. But if not, okay. You will tell his or her parents after lesson that this kid, for example, uses the mobile phone. Maybe parents will permit you to scold a child, maybe. However, in most cases, parents don't want you to behave like that. Let them raise their child by themselves. You need to be very patient. You need to be very careful about your behavior with children because their parents may not like it. Remember that your main goal is to teach how to dive, not to raise anybody. Oftentimes, if an instructor is a leader, people will listen to him. There are, of course, some exceptions, but most of the time, if instructor's speech is interesting, if he is a good orator, people will listen to him. Remember, but that you are not a school teacher, you are an instructor, the instructor, and students need to respect you, of course, also. When students scold you, you of course shouldn't take it for granted. In the other cases, person pays you for the lesson, and it's his or her own choice to study or not to study. You have also agreement with him. You had it, and he also need to understand it. Yeah. So this future person who provided services. The next future is businessman. It means that except of teaching students, instructor has a goal to earn some money, of course. For most of instructors, dying is a business. It's normal. You must be well paid for your good job. Good job must be well paid. And in the next lectures, we will talk about marketing, about various instruments that help you to make more money. For example, Andel academic presentation. Its plan and structure helps you to attract students to studying and so on. Then, next future is rescuer. It just means that in extraordinary situation, if it happens, unless all the taken measures, an instructor has to solve the problem. For example, you need to provide first aid when it's necessary. And in instructor training course, we just check such skills. Yeah, you need to know it already also. Another instructor's future is organizer. Experienced instructor needs to be a good organizer. In general, when a person becomes dive master, he had already been taught how to be an organizer. This person has to be able to organize groups, lead them under the water, and provide live buoys on the water surface, for example. An instructor has more organizers tasks. Organize diving, organize people in the group, organize practices, trips, and so on. Organizers' methods are not as simple as they seem to us. Mostly, we teach and go to the trips with adults. But they sometimes behave like children. They often don't have skills of self-organization. For example, you tell them that you will meet near the metro station at 5 o'clock. However, it's not enough for them. You need to provide to them all the details, because someone will wait for you in the inside. Someone will wait outside. Another person will be near exit number 1, another one near exit number 2, and so on. Someone may come at 5 o'clock in the morning and instead of 5 o'clock in the evening. I remember such situation. A person called to our manager at 6 a.m. and said that he was right near the swimming pool, but it was of course closed. He was told to come at 6 o'clock and he understood it as 6 a.m. But of course our manager means that he needs to be at 6 p.m. That's why the first rule for organizer is to give all the needed details to your students. For example, we will meet at 5 p.m. near the Zvingorodskoye metro station, near the exit number 2, by the left side of the road. You know, earlier tour operators managed to work in similar way of organization, and now also. But they provide their clients with brochures. And they say it like this, I remember it. You Jan Yershov, your flight is on the 7th of April 2020 at 5 p.m. from the airport Pulkovo, terminal, second terminal. You need to come there 2 hours before the flight at 3 p.m. You need to bring a passport, boarding pass, etc. And while listening to this information, you feel like a child. Why you talk me all of it? Because I already have a brochure here. It's written all of it. But these tour operators have a lot of experience. They know that people have a tendency to get the time or any other details wrong. I remember also one situation. One of my acquaintance get the flight month of Thailand wrong. The group came to the airport and found that one of the member was missing, and they called him and he said that, oh, I felt that our flight is next month, not now. Month. Because of that, remember to give maximum information. It's the first rule. Also, you need to find the easiest way of organization. I mean, that like an example also. Earlier people came to our center without navigators, Google Maps and something like this. They just came to the railway station and got a taxi and tell them address of the hotel. The hotel was near the office. And the driver asked usually for big prices, of course, but the distance was very short. In just about 10 minutes by car, something like this. And at the end of the course, students wanted already instructors, wanted just to go on foot to the rail station. And they asked about a better and faster road to our office, to railway station. And I could do that as an inmate of St. Petersburg. I live here all my life, so I can explain really the fastest way to the railway station. But this road will with many details and very difficult. You go right, then left, then straight, then right, then left, and so on. It was many details, and this man, if I will give him this kind of road, he forget it immediately. So because of it, I always told the person like this: you need to come out of our office and turn left and go straight to the quiet Big Nevsky Avenue. Then, when you will see it, it is big avenue, you need to turn right and go straight, and you will see railway station. So, the person only needed to turn right on Nevsky Avenue. It's very easy. It's very simple. Maybe it will be not so fast, but it's very easy, and I'm sure that this man find railway station. Because if I try to explain it in a more detailed way, the person will just lose his way. Because of it, I choose the simplest way, the simplest. And also the army officers usually choose the simplest way. And often they are very good organizer because of it. They may do it instinctively or consciously. For example, army officer needs to organize the route of soldiers, and he has two choices. The first is to guide them across the forest, or the second way, it's indirectly across the highway. and he gets them across the highway. It will be longer, but he is sure that each of the soldiers will find a way. And if they go across the forest, maybe it's of course shorter, but there will be more problems. They may be more problems. For example, someone will fall into comb, another will lose his road, and so on. So the road across the highway is more will be more reliable. So organizers need to follow two rules. First, to choose the simplest way, and the second, to give as many details as possible as it's possible and as it's needed. When candidate in instructor course coming to the practice, of course we apply these rules in practice here. But as you see, the eighth feature of instructor is to be an organizer. And the last feature of the instructor, ninth feature, is to be a leader. An instructor must be a leader. He needs to be a leader to accomplish the previous features in a more efficient way. Students will listen the instructor with leadership. And you know, leadership is not necessarily an innate quality. It's just a set of qualities and skills. Maybe the very least each person can become a leader. Someone of course will be better at it, another will be worse, but it's real. And you know, candidates sometimes argue about it, but it's real. And I usually give the writers or artists gift as an examples. Some people consider that it can only be natural talent, artists or writers talent. However, it's also a skill. You can also become a writer or an artist step by step, making paintings or notes. Like an example, many students from the St. Petersburg Academy of Art and Design are able to copy Mona Lisa. And you won't be able to recognize the copy with the necktie if you are not a specialist. It's really very good, will be very good painting like real Mona Lisa. Or we can also look at the journalists. They develop their skill as well also. And to be a famous artist or writer, but to be a famous artist or writer, you need not only to paint or write good, but also to be an innovator. Well, for example, the famous artist, famous person, is famous for painting new elements. Or maybe he added new tendency. For example, you of course know painting, Malevich painted the black square. And every one of us is able to do it. It's not difficult to paint black square. Yeah. But his painting became famous and costs very, very big money. Because there was an idea. It was an ending point of art. No, earlier, because iconographic, mythological, or ancient Greek scenes were painted. And there were many, many interpretations of them. And Malevich marked the end of that period. He told that all this is already painted. So I finish the art with this black square. And after that, the cubism and other techniques became very popular. And classical paintings were not so interesting to paint yet. Now. And the writers also famous for the ideas in their work. For example, Nikolai Gogol in Russia, Pushkin, or Goethe in Germany described lasting certain psychological types. General fiction is not so popular because the absence of an idea. If there is no idea, this book will be not very popular, or just for, I don't know, for just for 1 year, and after it everybody forget about it. It's the same with leadership. It's a set of skills that a person can be taught. It's possible. And instructor's training course aim is to impart an understanding how to learn the skills. So leader. I told you about 9 qualities of an instructor. Yeah, it seems that the person is just dying or free dying instructor, but he needs to take into consideration many features. He is an orator, psychologist, lecturer, businessman, and so on. And the instructor training course aim is to teach candidates all of this future, or at least give an understanding. 2 weeks, of course, is because a little amount of time for teaching. Yeah, so at least understanding. So it was a quite big introductory lecture, a preview to the rest of lectures, and that's all for now. Thank you for attention. If you have questions, you are welcome.